Welcome to the Radiant Vista. I'm Mark Johnson, and today I have a video tutorial on the absolutely thrilling release of Adobe's Photoshop CS3 public beta. On December 15th, 2006, Adobe released a very unusual thing. They released a public beta version of Photoshop CS3. This public beta version is available for download for anybody who would like to play around with it. So I'm going to give you an overview of some of the incredible new features available in Bridge and within Photoshop CS3. First things first, where do you find this public beta CS3 download? Well, I'll try to post this link on the Radiant Vista website, but let me tell you what it is right now. If you go to labs, that's L-A-B-S, .adobe, ADOBE.com /technologies, TECHNOLOGIES /Photoshop CS3 / that is where you can download a free copy of the CS3 public beta and enjoy playing around with it. Now, if you already own a previous version of Photoshop, then what you can do is you can go to this URL that I'm about to give you, and you can use your existing serial number for Photoshop so that when you download this public beta, you can plug in a specific serial number that Adobe gives you, and that will allow you to use the beta all the way up until sometime mid next year. Or I think it's actually indefinitely, but it will start giving you some dialog boxes indicating to you that the new version has actually been released. If you don't own a previous version of Photoshop, then you can get this public beta for 30 days and experiment with it over that period of time. Here's the address that you go to. If you already have a serial number for a previous version of Photoshop, you would go to www.adobe.com /go /Photoshop CS3 beta, and CS3, the 3 is not spelled out. It's just the number 3. Photoshop CS3 beta _ serial number, all one word. And that's going to allow you to plug in your existing Photoshop serial number and get a special one from Adobe that will allow you to keep this product running on your machine indefinitely. Anyway, so that's how you go about getting the product. Now, here are a few things that you'll want to know about it. First of all, CS3 supports Microsoft's new Vista operating system, and it's also natively supported on Apple's Intel-based Macs, and so it's going to run fast and efficiently once all of those things are in place. Keep in mind that this is a beta version, and that means that it's going to have some bugs. There are going to be some things that are going to go wrong as you play around with the beta. You can give Adobe feedback, and that will help them improve the product so that when it's actually released sometime in the summer, probably late summer of next year, 2007, and actually this video tutorial may release in 2007, so late summer 2007 is when they're actually going to release the full version. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take you on a little tour of the Bridge and Photoshop CS3 beta, and I'm not going to take you into the new Camera Raw 4.0. I really want to take you in there, but Craig of Radiant Vista or Matt is going to record a video tutorial exclusively about the Camera Raw dialog, and they're going to share things with you such as the fact that the new Camera Raw dialog box opens not only Camera Raw files, but it also opens JPEGs and TIFFs. There are a couple new sliders in there that you're going to hear about that are super exciting. And there's a fill light slider and a recovery slider. Those sort of behave like what you would have in the shadow highlight adjustment, but they're even more powerful, particularly because they're editing on the file while it's in its raw state, assuming that you're working on a raw file. But they really help maintain detail in highlights and open up difficult shadows. You're also going to learn about parametric curves in that tutorial that Craig or Matt will release. And even though parametric sounds like a frightening word, actually this is a version of curves that is much more user-friendly even for those who have feared curves up until this point. You're also going to learn about how you've got much more extensive color control via hue, saturation, and luminance sliders for individual colors within that new Camera Raw dialog box. There's also a killer grayscale adjustment. I'm going to tell you more about that coming up here soon. And you can do split toning. So lots of great new features in there. But for right now, what I want to do is dive into the new version of Bridge. And by the way, what I'm about to share with you, this is by no means a comprehensive overview. It's just some of the features that I think are going to be most useful to us as photographers. So what I'm going to do is go into the Bridge right here, and I want to show you a few of the new features. First of all, if I click on an image, you'll notice immediately here that I have a metadata pane. And by the way, I've reorganized these panes a little bit just because I like this organization better. If you want to learn about reorganizing panes, I recorded a video tutorial exclusively about the Bridge that you can find under the video tutorial link on the Radiant Vista site. But so I click here, and by the way, that was for CS2, not CS3. So I click on an image. You'll notice immediately down here under metadata that you can see, much like a camera readout, the f-stop and the shutter speed, the ISO, all of those features are right down here, and it's just this nice little format that looks a lot like what you would see on your camera. Now, if I move over top of the image right here in the preview window, you'll notice, and let's actually click on a different image to do this. Let's go on something like this. Now, when I move over top, I get that magnifying tool. If I click, then you'll see I can move around the image and click in different spots here, and I can see if the image is indeed sharp in those areas because it's magnified here up to 100%. So you can see your sharpness now through the Bridge. That's something that you couldn't do in the previous version. Here's something else that's neat. If you wanted to compare images side by side, when I select multiple images in the content pane here, you'll see that whatever images I select, they're now visible, all of them here in the preview window. So this gives you the opportunity to compare side by side exposures that might be very similar to one another and get a real nice feel for which one is going to work best for you. And of course, you'll be working on a bigger monitor than I am here in this video tutorial window, and so you're going to get much bigger previews than what I have right there. There's another neat new feature within the Bridge that I want to tell you about. If you go under File here, then you can choose to get photos from camera. So this is going to be something new that I'm going to incorporate into my workflow. Up until now, what I've done is I've created a unique folder through the Bridge, and in that folder I put subfolders. One of the subfolders is a RAW folder. I dump all of my images via the Bridge from my compact flash card into that RAW folder. And I go through that process in a fairly manual fashion in the current version of Bridge. Now, with this new release of Bridge, when you choose get photos from camera, you're going to first of all get a dialog box that's going to ask you if you want it to always open up a specific dialog here called Photo Downloader each time you plug in a compact flash card. I already said yes to that dialog because I want it to automatically open up the photo downloader every time I pop in a compact flash card, because that means I'm ready to download pictures. Now, within this dialog, which is too big for my recording space here, down below there's an advanced dialog button. There's some great features in that advanced dialog, but I don't want to take the time to go into those right now, so I'm going to stay in the basic dialog. And I want to show you that, first of all, it's showing you my compact flash card right up here. It's telling me I have 34 files. 34 files selected, and now I get to choose where I want to import those. So let's click the choose button here. Let's say in this dialog that I want to go onto my main Macintosh hard drive, and I'm working on a CS3 introduction here, so let's just say that's where I put my pictures. Your folder might say pictures, or it may just go loose on your hard drive. Now what I want to do is within that folder I'm going to choose new folder, and this folder would have the unique name of whatever I photographed. And these were icicles that I photographed in snowy Colorado just about a week ago. We've been getting snowstorm after snowstorm, and I photographed icicles, so I might put in that name, and then I might put in the date, and that was, let's just say 12-23-06. I'll hit create. Now I have a folder into which these files will go. I'll click choose. It's asking me right here if I'd like to have a subfolder, and I absolutely do. So from this pull down, I'll choose custom name, and I want the custom name to be something like raw files, because that's where I'm going to put all the raw files as they come off the camera. Then I have the opportunity as well here to not rename the files or to rename them however I want. So I'll say custom name, and I'll call this icicles, and I'm hoping that I'm spelling this correctly. There, icicles. Now it's telling me that all my files will be icicles, and then they'll go sequentially 0001 through however many I've got here. I can also have it automatically open up Adobe Bridge if Bridge isn't open at this point, but I've already got it open, so I'll switch that off. I can convert to DNG files, save copies to another location. Lots of good choices here. And then there's a button at the bottom right corner that you can't see here that says Get Photos. When I click the Get Photos button, it tells me that it's importing those images off of my compact flash card into a folder that I created on my Macintosh hard drive, or that could be your C drive if you're on a PC, and those images are now imported. I have sitting right here an icicles folder and a subfolder called raw files, and when I go in that, you'll notice that my icicle images are right here as the camera raw files that I originally captured. So I could do all those things to those files that I would normally do. Now, it's really nice that all of that process of renaming the files, deciding where they're going to go, and creating the subfolder is included in that Get Photos area. It also gives you the ability to add a copyright in the advanced section of it. So a lot of the things that I used to do step by step before, you can do them all together right now by choosing File and Get Photos from Camera. Pretty nice little feature. There's one other thing I want to share with you. Right here in the bridge, there is an improved slideshow function. In the past, I've used the slideshow function under View Slideshow just to rate my images and to view them very large while I'm rating them. Now, if you want to, and you're going to share these images with your clients or your friends, you can go into slideshow options, and you can choose to do things like blacking out additional monitors, repeating the slideshow. You can choose a specific duration for the slides to be on the screen. You can choose to center them. You can choose a transition between them. Then you click the play button and off you go. I'm not actually going to do that right now, but now you can share your images via slideshows here within the bridge, much like you would be able to do through Adobe Lightroom, and that's a nice feature. I played around with it a little bit. It needs a little bit of tweaking still, and hopefully that will happen in this CS3 beta version, but I think it's going to be a nice little feature within the bridge. So those are just some of the many things that are available through this new version of Adobe Bridge. Now let's go ahead and dig right into Photoshop and see what we've got there in Photoshop CS3 beta. So I'm going to dig in here, and let's bring up an image. Actually, let's not bring up an image. I want to show you something first. First things first, within Photoshop you have a much more customizable interface. You have expandable and collapsible palette panes. So for instance, right now, because I'm recording in this small window, you can't see a lot of what I'm telling you about. So this is just going to be a voice a voice related part of the tutorial. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show you, but I can show you over here with the tool palette. By default, it looks like that. It's one long narrow palette that stays out of your way more than the old one. Well, I clicked here because of space issues. I clicked on that little tiny button, and now you'll notice that I have the old-fashioned two-row palette or two-column tools palette right there. You also, on the right-hand side of the screen, unfortunately you can't see that right now, you have a whole bunch of palettes that are stacked together, and you can collapse them or expand them very nicely. One nice thing about that is under the viewing modes, which you'll find right down here at the bottom of the tools palette. Whoops, I actually clicked one and I got something I did not want. Let's just get this back to where we were. Under here, let's see if I can't get it to do quite what I want. You have 4 choices now. I used to edit everything in full screen mode with that menu bar, which would put a gray field around my picture. Well, now what you can do is you can go into a mode that is called maximize screen mode, and that maximize screen mode means that as you are expanding and collapsing palettes, it's automatically resizing your image so that you're not inadvertently covering up the image with any of the palettes. So it keeps the image separated from the palettes at all time by resizing it in terms of the magnification on screen as you expand or collapse the palettes. Super nice little feature, something simple. Right down here at the bottom of the tools palette is where you find that feature, or you can press the F key a few times on your keyboard and it will cycle you through those different modes. Something else that's nice in Photoshop, if you've worked at all with smart objects, and I have a video tutorial on the Radiant Vista site under the video tutorials button that is related specifically to smart objects. So if you want to learn more about smart objects, then you can check out that tutorial that I recorded in version CS2. But now, since smart objects are really starting to take hold, Photoshop has, or Adobe has, put in place something here under the file menu where you can actually open an image, any image, as a smart object. So if I choose File, Open as Smart Object, and then I go click on an image and click Open here, you'll notice, let me just shrink that down a hair, you'll notice that I have this tiny icon right down here in the bottom right corner of that particular layer, indicating that this is indeed a smart object. Smart objects have a lot of powerful uses. I cover several of them in that video tutorial on the Radiant Vista site. Now, let's look at something else that you can do with smart objects. I'm going to close this picture and not going to bother saving it. I want to bring in another image, and I want to show you something that's very special about the use of smart objects. You now have something called smart filters. If you're working on a smart object layer, then you can apply filters now sort of the way you would adjustment layers. In other words, they are non-destructive and you can infinitely edit them. So you have a lot more control than you used to have in version CS2 of Photoshop. So this is pretty impressive. I'll show you the process. I've got an image right here. It's not a smart object layer, so if I want to add a smart filter to it so that I can edit this filter in a lot of very unique, non-destructive ways, I can go under the filter menu, and the first thing I do is choose Convert for Smart Filters. It tells me here a little bit of information. That's nice to know. You may not want to see that every time, so you could click Don't Show Again and then press OK here. Now that layer is a smart object, which means I can now go up under Filter and I can choose any one of these filters. I'm going to go to the Filter Gallery and get into this filter gallery, and we're going to play around with some filters. I'm going to show you how we can infinitely edit these filters and possibly even come up with some combinations that we wouldn't have been able to successfully pull off before, because we can tweak the opacity and the blending modes for these filters as well. Alright, so we're in the filter gallery, and this dialog is again a little bit too large. Or let me get rid of, I'm going to get rid of my water paper there, and let's get rid of texturizer. Actually, let's start with texturizer. So you can pick any filter you want. Let's say I want texturizer here, and say I want a little bit more depth to that. You can see I'm getting that effect on my image over here. Now if I want to add in other filters, and this was available in CS2, I can click on the button that you see right down here, which is New Effect Layer, and now I could click and choose, say, water paper or any other filter that I want, and I can play around with those choices right up in this slider area. Now, once I have the look that I want, I press OK, but I don't even worry that it may not be exactly what I want because I can re-edit this. So I press OK, and you'll notice in the Layers palette something that's all new. You have a Smart Filter layer here with something down here that says Filter Gallery, indicating that this is a combination of various filters from the filter gallery. Now, if I want to get back into those filters, I can double click on the words filter gallery here. It takes me right back in where I left off. I can change certain features like that and click OK. Now I have the modified filter right here, or combination of filters. So just double click on filter gallery. It takes you right back in. Now, something else that you can do is you can eliminate this effect from certain parts of the image because you also have a ready-made mask right here. If I click on that mask right next to the word Smart Filters here, and then I use the brush and make it black, make sure I'm set to normal mode and 100% opacity and flow. Now, wherever I paint, I am hiding the effect of that filter, just like that. So now I've got the mask painted here. I'm hiding the effect of that filter. Because it's a mask, that's impermanent. I could bring that back by painting with white, but I'm going to undo that because I actually wanted to get rid of that. So I have the mask that allows me to take away the filter effect from certain areas. I have the filter gallery listed here, allowing me to go back in and infinitely modify these filters because the settings are locked in exactly as I left them. And then I've got another neat feature here. If I click on this tiny icon right out here that says, and you can't read this, double click to edit filter blending options. If I double click on that, then I get a blending options area here, and I can choose different blending modes for my filters. So I can look into different styles, different looks here for my filters. You see how you get various looks right there, and you can address the opacity of those filters. I actually want to leave that cranked up, I think, right now. But you can play around with all kinds of different options having to do with mode or opacity. So you can imagine here you have an infinite number of possibilities and infinite flexibility. So now I'm going to click OK. Got that image, say, where I want it. But even if I don't, when I save this file and reopen it, I can get right back in and continue to work on this combination of filters. Pretty impressive. If that's too much for you, you don't want to do that. As long as this is not a smart layer, what am I trying to say here? A smart object, thank you. As long as this is not a smart object, then you can continue to use filters as you would in Photoshop CS2 or prior versions. Now, the last thing I want to say here about these smart filters, and this is pretty nice. Let me drag my smart filters to the trash can, get rid of them, is that the shadow highlight adjustment, I was hoping it would be an adjustment layer in CS3, but it looks like it's probably not going to be. So what you can do is you can, as long as this is a smart object, as long as your particular layer is a smart object, you want to filter and convert it for smart filters, then if you go under Image and you choose Adjustments, Shadow Highlight. So we haven't duplicated our background layer to do this. If I apply Shadow Highlight right now, let's just say I really want to open up those shadows and I really want to shut down those highlights. When I click OK, you'll notice that Shadow Highlights, an adjustment, not an adjustment layer, has basically become a smart filter here, which means that I can double click on Shadow Highlights down here and go back in and make adjustments to it. I can double click on this icon just to the right of Shadow Highlights, and I can change my blending modes or my opacity. I'm going to cancel out of that. Or if I don't want the Shadow Highlight, I can't say adjustment layer, I'll call it Shadow Highlight Smart Filter. If I don't want that to have an impact somewhere, I can click on the mask and I can paint with black in areas where I want the image to look the way it did prior to running the Shadow Highlights adjustment as a smart filter. Pretty impressive that you can do that. Let me move on here and show you some other great features in this CS3 beta. there's something new called the Quick Selection tool, and let's get into that. For those of you who are used to making selections using the magnetic lasso, which I love in CS2, there's a new tool that you might be interested in, and it is called the Quick Selection tool. It's right over here below the Move tool, and you'll notice it sits on top of the magic wand because Adobe believes you're going to be using the Quick Selection tool in place of the magic wand in the future. With this tool, let me go ahead and just right-click up here and reset it back to its defaults. What you do is you move over something almost like you're painting it with a brush. And because you're working with something that's similar to a brush, you can use the left or right mouse, sorry, not mouse buttons, bracket keys to make your brush larger or smaller. But if I go over this apple and I start to paint, notice how it spreads. Now, it got away from me right there. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to make my brush a little smaller and be a little more careful, and I'm going to pick up between brush strokes. Now, in this case, it still got away from me. It was overly effective. It's really easy at this point to click on this button right up at the top in the options bar called Subtract from Selection, zoom the picture forward, and then get in here with a nice small brush and just paint away the area that you wish was not inadvertently selected. And look at the way this is grabbing around the edges of things. You can use a really small detailed brush if you wanted to get in there and do detailed work. Not going to take the time to do that right now. Let's come over to something like this rose that would really be difficult with the magic wand. I'm going to add to selection, so I'm clicking that button in the options bar. Now I'm going to paint over my rose, and I'm picking up the brush as I go just so it doesn't spill too far out. Now it got a little outside the edges down here, so I'm going to use the Subtract From, go to a smaller brush or a smaller Quick Selection tool, and then get in here and do more detailed work. And I would do more detailed work like that if I were really taking the time to make this work, but it's remarkable how fast it works and what a great job it does. Now, it's made the quick selection. That's a great thing, but you usually want to refine the edges of a selection that's made this quickly. So what you can do in Photoshop here in the CS3 beta, you can go up to a button in the options bar here called Refine Edge. That's also available for any selection making tool under Select and Refine Edge. But I'm going to go up here and click on the Refine Edge button. It brings up this nice dialog box that you see right here, where I can first and foremost decide how I want to view these edges. So I can click on the mask button. It shows me as if that is a mask or an alpha channel. I can click here and it will put my elements that I'm trying to select over white. Here they're over black. Here they're with the red overlay, and here they're in standard mode. So you can choose how you want to view them. I might go with either white or black in this case, or maybe back and forth between the two. Now, when you move over radius, contrast, smooth, feather, and contract, expand, when you move over these 5 things, let's move to radius. You'll notice at the bottom of that dialog, it tells you what you're doing. It says increase the radius to improve the edge in areas with soft transitions or fine details. So you can listen to what it's saying. I don't want to go in too far, obviously, here. I think I actually want to go a little bit left of where it was. We'll move over contrast. It's saying to make soft edges crisp and remove fuzzy artifacts. So the edges get harder when I move that to the right. They get softer when I move it to the left. So again, I can get kind of just what I want. Then you've got smooth, which removes the jagged edges along a selection edge. So you can really smooth out a selection with that. You've got feather, which softens the selection edge with a uniform blur. And in this case, I don't want to soften very much. And then you can expand or contract your selection. Left is going to contract it. Right is going to expand it. So with these sliders in the Refine Edge dialog box, and with the ability to see the elements over different colored backgrounds and in different fashions, you can really get some killer selections super quickly. Now I'm going to click OK, and you'll notice it takes me right back into the marching ants. So I still have the background layer intact. I've got the marching ants right here. At this point, I might float that selected area or those selected areas onto their own layer with Command or Control J. And just for kicks, let's bring in another picture here. I'm going to do a select all and an edit copy and just get that out of here. And I'm going to paste that in below this. I'll choose an edit paste it below this so that I can see what would happen if I placed those elements in front of a different background. And you can see you got some pretty clean edges right there and got those really quickly using the wonderful new quick selection tool and the refine edge dialog box. All right, let's get these out of here and take a look at another exciting feature. There's something else in this new beta version called auto align layers, and there's another feature associated with that called auto blend layers. I've only played around with this briefly, so let's hope this works. But this is a neat way to kind of replace what you did in the photo merge dialog box with even more power than you had before. So if you're used to stitching panoramas together with photo merge, try doing it this way and see how things go for you. I have 3 panels. I've got this panel here, which is going to be my, I think that's my left hand panel. I've got this one here, which is my center panel, and this one here, which is going to be the right hand panel. Now what I'm going to do is I'll just take this left hand panel here and I'm just going to paste those other layers on top of this. So I'm going to go ahead and take this other file here. I'm going to do a select all, which is Command or Control A, and a edit copy, which is Command or Control C, and then I'll get that out of here. And I'm just going to paste it on top with Command or Control V. I'll do the same thing with this other panel. So Command or Control A to select all, Command or Control C to copy, and get that out of here. And then come over into here and Command or Control V to paste. Now I have my 3 panels stacked one on top of another here in the layers palette. I'm going to select them all by shift clicking on the bottom layer here. That selected the entire contiguous range by shift clicking on the bottom layer. Now I'm going to go under Edit and choose Auto Align Layers. It's going to bring up this dialog box with several choices in here. I'm going to use the auto projection mode and click OK. It's going to take off running here. It is aligning the selected layers based on the content, and there it aligned them. Let me see if I can show this to you. You can see here it did a pretty nice job. It had to bend some things, but it did a pretty nice job of aligning all 3 of those layers for me, and I didn't even have to expand the canvas for it to do that. Now let's take a look. You see how we have this harsh edge right here. I think that's, yeah, if I work with this top panel here, which is actually the central one, and then let's see here. See if this works. Actually, if I want to work on that edge, let's try moving this down. Yeah, let's work with this layer and this one right here and deal with that edge right there that you can see. So if I shift click to select these 2 layers and I go to Edit Auto Blend Layers, let's see what happens here. It didn't work. This is what I've been running into. I need to test this out some more. Let me try moving that back up and let's just see what happens if we do it in here. This is probably operator error. Okay, well that did a pretty nice job. On this particular line right here, basically I was working with the central panel and the right panel, had those 2 selected. When I chose Edit and did Auto Blend Layers, watch what happens to that line right there. So a moment ago we had this, and now we have that. So it blended those 2 really nicely, did a great job in there. Over here it didn't do such a good job. I'm going to have to play around more to figure out how to refine that, but I think this is a great new feature available in the CS3 beta here. It's under the Edit menu. You got Auto Align Layers, which basically created the 3 panels side by side and blended them. And then you have Auto Blend Layers, which should get rid of those visible seams between the panels. You're going to need to play around with that one a bit. And of course, with this image, you'd want to go in after the fact and use the crop tool and crop away some of this extra white space around the edges. I'm going to go ahead and close that up. Hey, something I didn't mention to you that I intended to do right from the start is if you want to know what's new in CS3, under Window you can choose Workspace, and then you can choose right here what's new in CS3. What that's going to do, and let me just click yes, don't save. What it's going to do is it's going to highlight in blue all of the new features that you have within CS3. So if it shows up as blue, that means it's a new feature. I'm going to get rid of those blue overlays for right now by going back to my specific workspace. There we go. Now we got rid of those, but that allows you to see what's new in CS3. Kind of handy. All right, let's look at something else here. I love this next thing I'm about to show you. Actually, it's one of the easiest things you can do, and it's so incredibly powerful. Adobe introduced in CS3 a new adjustment layer called black and white. Sounds simple, but I want to show you how powerful it is. But before I do that, let me show you the old-fashioned way and show you that the old-fashioned way has a nice new feature in and of itself. If I wanted to convert this image to black and white quickly the old-fashioned way, what I would do is go up under Layer and choose New Adjustment Layer, and I would pick Channel Mixer. And I'm just going to click OK, not going to bother naming anything right now. Now the channel mixer is as it was before, except for you now have a preset pull down. And there's some nifty things in this preset pull down. You have, for instance, black and white infrared, or as if you shot this black and white with a red filter, or black and white with a yellow filter. So you can look at different presets as if you shot this image black and white with various filters or using infrared film. Quick and easy ways to get into a nice black and white mode using the channel mixer. But there's an even better way in my opinion now, and let me show you what it is. If I go under the layer menu and choose New Adjustment Layer and then black and white, I'll just leave the name as is and click OK. In this black and white dialog box, I have 6 different color sliders. Each one of these represents a color that existed a moment ago in the picture. For instance, red would be the red of this barn next to the water. When I move this slider, what I'm doing is I'm changing the luminance values of only the reds in the scene. So if I want bright reds, I can do that, or dark reds, I can do this. The yellow slider, if I go to the right, I am brightening the luminance of anything that has a strong yellow component. If I go left, I'm darkening it. I like brightening those. With greens, anything that's green can be darkened to the left or lightened to the right. So that affected these sort of petals down here, or these grasses, or whatever feature I have there in the lower left corner. Cyans, that's affecting the sky. I can either wash the sky out or darken it down. Blues, I can wash it out or darken it down, and you can start to see a halo forming in there. That's again, operator error when I worked on the image, but it's not too bad. And there aren't too many magentas in this image, so I'm not getting much impact off of that. But you see how quickly you can go in here and create an absolutely dynamite black and white image just by changing the luminance values using those sliders. If you want to change the overall luminance of the scene, just click on the picture, drag to the right. It's brightening the overall luminance, and to the left is darkening the overall luminance of the picture. So you can have an impact on the entire scene by doing that, by clicking and dragging. Not very intuitive, but it works. Final thing that you can do in here is if you want to tint or tone this scene, click the tint checkbox and then pick the hue, the specific color that you want using this slider. Let's go with a sepia tone, something maybe in there, and then pick the intensity of that color or the saturation using this slider right here. So very quickly we've gone from a color image to an absolutely dynamite black and white image, and we did it so easily using the 6 color sliders, and in this case it's a sepia toned image because we tinted it right there. I think that's impressive, and that is a feature that I really look forward to using in CS3. Let's look at something else. Let me close that picture out and bring in another one here, and we're going to examine the new curves dialog box in CS3. Adobe this time around, what they did is they introduced some new very good features to curves, and they didn't affect any of the things that those of us who love curves have been using over time. So if I choose Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and pick Curves, and then click OK, you'll notice that my Curves dialog box looks a little different than it did before. if you click this button right here where it says Curve Display Options, you get a bunch of new options down there. What I want to look at first is that you have some presets up here. At the top of the dialog, you can choose to have your image look like a color negative. You can cross-process it, which would be like processing print film in E6, which is slide film chemistry, or slide film in print film chemistry. You can make it darker. You can do an increase of the contrast. You can do medium contrast, whatever you want. You have a bunch of presets up there, which are pretty handy. Now, if you actually want to come down here and work on the curve, you've got some things you didn't have before. First of all, you have a visible histogram in here and an associated histogram checkbox down here. So if you don't like the histogram, you can switch it off, but if you do like it the way I do, you can switch it on. Now, in association with that histogram, you'll notice this image already has a few pixels that are pure black and some that are pure white. Now, if I want to see clipping through curves, which is something you couldn't see in CS2, I can click the Show Clipping box, and now, it's hard to see things, if I move this slider in, when I see white pixels appear in the scene, then I've blown out highlights. If I move the shadow slider in, when I see black pixels, then I've blocked up some shadows. So you can see all of that by checking the Show Clipping checkbox that we have right here. Other things that you're going to find interesting about this new Curves dialog box. See how it says Channel Overlays here? Got a checkbox for that. Well, if I go make a change to, say, the red channel, let's just say I want to add red to the middle tone, so I move up toward the word red. When I go back to the RGB channel, because I have Channel Overlays checked right here, I can see that red channel right in there. If I uncheck it, it's gone, but I can see what I did to the red channel. If I then made a change to the blue channel, say I added some yellow to the midtones to warm up the scene, then I can go back into RGB and I can see that I've also bent the blue channel curve. So those changes are now visible within the Curves dialog. So that's a great step forward, I think, for Adobe here in CS3, or actually for the end user, for us. There are other features down in here that you may want to take a look at, experiment with, but those are the primary wonderful changes that occurred in the Curves dialog box. All right, let's get this one out of here and let's go look at just a couple more changes before I wrap up this tutorial. I've got an image here. This is a multi-layered image. You can look in the layers palette. You can see I've got the background layer there. I repaired a hot spot that was in this upper portion of the poppy right here. Got rid of a little hot spot using a Command or Control J technique where I basically borrowed from another part of the poppy. And I got a series of adjustment layers that are making some subtle color changes to that scene. Adobe modified the clone stamp tool to improve it. They did several nice things to improve it, and I want to show you those nice new features. I'm going to click on the clone stamp. I'm going to reset it by just choosing Reset Tool here. And I want to show you what's available. Before, when I would do cloning within Photoshop in version CS2 and prior, I would always duplicate my background layer or whatever layer I was trying to clone. And I did that for safety purposes, but it added a lot of additional file size to the images. And I did that because occasionally when I was cloning, if I already had adjustment layers in place, I would run into situations where I'd be cloning and I would have these weird looking things occurring with the adjustment layers. The adjustment layers might be brightening or color changing the image as I cloned. So there are some features here with this clone stamp tool that are making all of this much better. First of all, you don't need to duplicate your background layer anymore. You can just choose Layer, New Layer, create a blank new layer, which is basically going to be your cleaned layer. And now what you can do is you can clone onto this layer using the layer below it as sort of the source, or using all of these layers, or just using the layers that contain pixels and ignoring the adjustment layers. Let me show you how. Up here where it says sample, I can sample the current layer, which since I have a blank layer there, that wouldn't do me any good. If I choose current and below, it's now going to sample this background layer below, so that when I click, say, here, or Option or Alt click to sample, and then I come up here and start to work. It's working on my blank layer there, pulling from the layer below. But let's say that I want to use all layers. Well, in this case, what might happen sometimes is that it's going to, actually, let's see if I can find a good example of this. This is a difficult one for me to find a good example. If I do current and below, let me go back to that for a sec. Let me switch this off for just a moment so you can see that I have that hotspot there, which I fixed via this layer. If I do current and below and I sample this region right up here using Option or Alt, and I slide down here, notice that because it's sampling only from the layer below, it's taking that bad glowing hotspot, which I don't want. So what I would do if I wanted to pull from this layer above the cleaned layer is I would choose all layers. Now when I sample to move that down, it's taking from this spot right here, which is exactly what I want. But if I'm getting any weird color shifts while that's happening, that might be because I have adjustment layers switched on. If that's the case, you can come up to this button right here that says Turn on to ignore adjustment layers when cloning. If I click this button right up here in the options bar to the right of the sample pull down menu, it's going to ignore any adjustment layers that I have. That is a remarkably powerful feature. Now when I do my cloning up here, I'm going to have exactly what I want occurring. And I'm not able to really show you this very well. I didn't pick the world's best sample image for this. But just know that the ability to choose what layer or layers you're sampling from and the ability to make it so you're not sampling from adjustment layers, those are two wonderful enhancements to the clone stamp tool. Also, there's a new palette here. If I go under Window and choose Clone Source, and let's bring the clone source over here so we can see it, you'll notice that I have something here called Show Overlay. There's some other nice features in here as well. I haven't found out any remarkably great uses for those yet. I'm sure some will come along in other people's tutorials or perhaps even my tutorials in the future. But for now, what I like is this Show Overlay function. What it does is it allows you, when you sample an area, let's say I want to sample this grass here. Now when I move out here, I can see where that grass exists. I can see what I'm doing. Now let me intensify the overlay so you can see that better. Let's make it 50% opacity right down here. Now when I sample that, I can see exactly where I'm placing the grass. Say I want it to be growing out of this area right up there. I can switch off the overlay and I can see what I did. Hypothetically, I can switch off the overlay. There we go. I had to switch it off and then click on the layer. Not that I like what I did there, but it's nice to be able to see what you're sampling from overlaid in the area where you're going to put that sample when you're cloning. So some really nice new additions to the clone stamp tool in CS3. Let me get this out of here. Let's move the clone source palette out of the way. And I want to show you just a few other real quick things that you can do in this killer beta version of Photoshop. One thing is this. If you've ever used the eyedropper tool before, if I click on the eyedropper, in the past I would always set my average to 3 by 3, so I'm sampling 9 pixels whenever I'm sucking up a color or trying to get a representative color sample. Well, with these super high resolution files that have come along, Adobe decided to expand this so you now have 11 by 11 average, 31 by 31, so on and so forth. I suspect with high-res files I'll be working with anywhere between 5 by 5 average and maybe all the way up to 31 by 31 average in the future to get a more accurate color sample when I use that eyedropper tool. Adobe also improved the print dialog box in this public version of CS3. What they did here, if I go under File, you'll notice first of all there's no print with preview, it's just print. If I choose print, it brings up the print dialog box, and they made this just simpler, easier to use, and it's even got some reminders that help us out. First of all, if I need to reorient my image quickly, I don't have to go into page setup right here. I can just click on the button that I see right down here below this preview window and it will reorient the image on the page. I still have these same features like center image and scale media to fit the or scale to fit the media, so scale the image to fit the media. It now tells me my print resolution. That's super handy. That wasn't there before. And over under color management here, you'll notice that I have the same area here under print. This is my starting profile, the one that I have assigned to my image. But under color handling, I can choose here to have Photoshop manage colors. It just, the language is better than it was before. So I choose Photoshop manages color, and it reminds me, did I disable color management in the printer dialog? So if I'm going to let Photoshop manage the color, meaning that I have a good paper profile, which hopefully I do, then by letting Photoshop manage the color, I need to switch off Epson's color management. And it's asking me, hey, have I disabled that color management in the printer dialog? So it's reminding me to do that, which I'll do in just a second. Now I might pick my printer profile, which I would do also in CS2. I'm going to pick one down here. We'll just go with a 1280 printer and matte paper. That's all pretty similar. But you notice when I did that, or actually did you notice, because I didn't point it out, when you change to different profiles, you actually get a color managed preview over here. So as I change these from one to another, you get a color managed preview over in this window, which is brand new in this CS3 version. One other thing, if I click print here, since they reminded me to disable color management, when I click print and I get into the actual print dialogs, they're reminding me under color management to disable Epson's color management or Canon's color management or HP's color management by checking the no color adjustment box. So that was just a nice little reminder that they gave me. Anyway, that is the new and improved print dialog in CS3. There are a ton of other features that I'd love to share with you, but what I recommend is go to that website that I mentioned in the beginning of this tutorial, labs.adobe.com/technologies/Photoshop CS3. 3 is the number, not spelled out. And download your own public beta version of Photoshop CS3. Get in there and start playing around and see what you come up with, and give Adobe feedback so that this will be the absolute best upgrade of Photoshop that we've ever had. And also keep your eyes peeled for the Camera Raw tutorial that either Craig or Matt is going to record. That'll be coming out on the Radiant Vista soon. And I look forward to sharing lots of wonderful new techniques in much more detail with you through the Photoshop Workbench and video tutorials in the future on the Radiant Vista. Thanks so much for being with me on this very long but quite enjoyable video tutorial.